Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Therese Faessler. Tess is the founder of Equitika. In this episode, we'll be discussing Tess's insights on how we change the way we think about money and our financial health. Tess, welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Tony, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. You and I have talked about this, these topics for quite a while. So I think this is going to be a really awesome conversation. So, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story?
Okay, so I grew up in the 60s and the 70s in New Jersey. So pretty much during the whole social unrest, racial, gender, Vietnam War, that's where my ideas were formed. And I was there until in New Jersey. I went to the Rutgers University and I studied economics. And that's where my worldviews were really formed, because it's there that I learned that most inequality in this world is not based on racial inequality or gender inequality or national inequality. It's all a matter of economics. It's all a matter of wealth. And if we can figure that out, like the people who are causing all this crime, it's not a race, it's an economic environment where they are. And they're not given the same opportunities, and so that persists over time. So that's where I come from. I came from there, and I took a short break between my undergraduate and graduate studies. I came to Switzerland, I met my husband, and I've been here for 40 years. And here I went back to, finally, after 20 years, I went back to school. And I always had this, from this teacher that I had at Rutgers, I always had this idea of this problem with this wealth gap. And why does that exist? And it's because of opportunity. And how can we solve that problem? And so I went back to the university here and got a master's in quantitative economics and finance, because I had the idea that the reason that there's a wealth gap in modern economies is because some people own the economy and the other people drive the economy. And the people who are driving the economy, the people who are making a living wage, they're contributing to the prosperity of the shareholders of those companies. So we're kind of living in this medieval society where the landowners in medieval times are the shareholders of today, and the people who are making their living wages are the serfs of Middle Ages. And so I wanted to be at the university where I had access to data and computers and the education to be able to test that hypothesis. And it was right. So in most modern economies, there's less than 2% of the population own most of the wealth in the country. And that's in the United States and Canada and Switzerland and Germany and in England. It's all over the place. And it makes sense because, you're working at Nestle and you're making Nespresso capsules and you're going to the store and you're buying those Nespresso capsules. But every time you buy one of those capsules or a chocolate bar, the shareholders of Nestle are profiting off that, and they haven't done anything. You were making them, and somebody who's a shareholder is profiting off your work, and that's just how it goes. That's how the system works. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. Just to back up for a minute before we really jump into everything else is, people hear the term economics, but I think a lot of people don't know what economics actually means. Could you give us just a quick description of what economics is?
Okay, economics is the study of well-being, the study of well-being in financial terms. It's the study, there's macroeconomics and microeconomics. So it's the study of how firms work, individual firms and employees and business administration, how those things work. And then you have macroeconomics, which is where I'm more interested is, and how does it work for society? How does money work in society? What is the job of central banks? What does Jerome Powell do? That's macroeconomics, and that's where my concentration is, because I want to see the broader picture of why is the economic environment, the financial environment, the companies, how they all work, and how they profit, how society profits from that work. So it's a matter of GDP. It's a matter of how production costs and production and how society grows over time. How does a society grow over time? That's my interest. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think, people hear that all the time. Jerome Powell's doing this, and, the Federal Reserve is doing that, and, that's moving the markets. And then, I think for most people, they're like, what does that even mean? So, I think to break it down, just to start to understand, I mean, we could have a whole show about what is economics, but just to give people a sense that it's the greater picture of how things integrate, I think is super helpful. Although personally, I struggled with economics in college when I took it, so I may not be the best person to talk about it.
Well, economics is about financial well-being of the individual and of society as a whole. And if I could just, I love to say this about Jerome Powell. I would love to say this about central banks. Central banks have one job, they have two jobs, and that is the employment rate and the inflation rate. And the only tool they have, or the tool they have, is interest rates. And they lower interest rates to trigger growth. So when there's more unemployment, they want people to have they want companies to hire more people. They lower interest rates, companies borrow more money, more people get to work. And when inflation is very high, they have to lower the interest rate. They have to increase the interest rate when inflation is very high to get people off of borrowing and off of, because when the inflation rate gets high, that's when things get overheated. And that's what we're seeing right now. Right now in September, Jerome Powell will probably decrease the interest rate in order to get inflation under control.
Yeah, so essentially, they drive behavior. And I think that's a great definition, to give people a sense, because like you said, is, it influences what people are doing, and they're trying to adjust it for the good of society, because, the economy overall, to try to make everything work. And it's a difficult job.
Right. I'm going to make sure that I said that correctly. He's going to probably decrease the interest rates in September, probably, because the economy is slowing down, inflation is slowing down, and if he decreases the interest rates, it'll trigger growth again, and he can form that. So it's a fine line that he's walking in.
Yeah, not an easy job. So, let's switch up and get into some of our questions. Why should consumers be mindful with their money? Okay,
for me, there's two main reasons they should be mindful of their money. On the one hand, they should be mindful of their money as they are mindful of their health. You want enough health to last a lifetime. So you should be careful of your consumption and of your exercise. And so you want your body to last for a lifetime. On the same way, you want your money to last for a lifetime, because you're only going to be actually earning money during your working years. And after your working years, you're not going to be earning any money. And you want to have enough money to live for the whole life by using the money that you earn during your life. So that's the idea of being mindful of your money, is to be able to save enough to live a whole lifetime.
Yeah, well, that's great. And, there's different ways to look at it is, some people talk about retirement. I like to talk about it more as financial independence because that's really, what, I think that you're talking about is having enough money to last the rest of your lifetime means you don't need to have any other income. You're financially independent and you can go forward. So I think that is important, and like you talk about with your health is, if you take care of your health when you're younger, it'll pay off when you're older, hopefully. So
Exactly.
not always,
Exactly.
but so one of the things, we talk about habits, and habits are so important. How should people think about changing our habits?
I love this question. So a habit is just something that you got to be accustomed to, whether it's always having dessert after dinner or always going to Starbucks or to a coffee shop for a coffee, whatever it is. It's just something that you always do. And it's okay. It's part of your routine. And I think that's important to change your it's not easy. It's not easy to change a habit, but it's important to change your habit to see what the opportunity costs. Now I'm going to use another economic word, to see what you could have been doing had you not done what you always did, because there's unlimited possibilities of what you could be doing. And that's the idea of changing habits. What else could I be doing instead of that?
Well, and I think that's a good way to look at it because, when we're thinking about our money, that's what we're really thinking about is, what else could we have done? What else could we do moving forward? Because if we don't change our habits, we always end up in the same place. So we have to change our habits to have different results. So that's really super helpful. So, one of the things we've talked about are, health and wealth. When you and I first started talking about doing the show, is we talked about that. So, that the first question there is why should health and wealth debts be justifiable? The debts we take on, why should we be able to justify them?
Okay, so first of all, health and wealth converge with age, right? The older you get, the more wealth you'll need in order to compensate for whatever health issues you may have. So they converge with way. And what is important to think about is when we're talking about health and wealth and debts, we're talking about long-term versus short-term. And so the question is, why is it okay to have some health and wealth debts? Well, you know what? Ice cream tastes good. For goodness sakes, or maybe I want to go on that vacation. It makes me happy. It really, really makes me happy, even though I may not be able to afford it. It's a debt that I'm taking on. But the question is debt worth it? Whether it's the ice cream or the trip. And so are they justifiable? Yes, sometimes. Yes, sometimes if it makes you happy, sure. But the point there is, I would say the point of happiness is, how happy does it make you? Is it worth it?
I love that. Is it worth it? Because, that is something I've had on guests, who, did the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And they really, saved every penny and, reduced all their expenses for 10 years. And at the end of the time, they were miserable. They didn't have much of a life. Their housing wasn't what they wanted. They didn't go on vacations and all those things. And they were successful in achieving maybe financial independence or being really far on that road, but they missed out on so many things that you have to find joy because, in my mind, you never know what's going to happen. So you also can't deny yourself some joy as well for that. So I love that answer. Is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? And as you point out, I think the most important things, does it bring you joy? Does it make you happy?
I mean, you have to think about it in a health way. Think about a cigarette smoker, right? They're smoking cigarettes, and if they really, really love cigarettes, I mean, then you have to ask them, was it worth it? Or, after time, was it worth it? Did it make you happy enough to compensate for all the health issues that you might have when you're 60 or 70? Was it worth it? And that's a question. I mean, not a question I can answer for everyone.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, we hear so much about give up your daily coffee. And it's like, well, one, if you really like your daily coffee, like I had a cappuccino from Starbucks this morning. I like that. And it's not the smartest financial move, but, a $5 coffee once or twice a week is not going to make or break your financial life. Saving 1% in expense ratios on your mutual funds is going to possibly make or break your financial life. So I think that's another dimension to this too, is what is that debt that you're taking on? Something like smoking, that's going to have a huge impact on your health. So, that's a much bigger debt.
And your finances as well today.
That's true,
smoking is expensive.
Yeah. Well, I go back to an age where you may go back as well, where they even had, smoking in high school, and there was a smoking area in all high schools.
Sure.
Do you remember that?
Sure.
Which is crazy to think about nowadays. So let's move on. Actually, we started talking about this. You mentioned this, is why is it so important to consider that these things bring you satisfaction? Why, to you, and I know you started to talk about that, but why is that such an important part of the conversation?
The question is, are things worth it? It's not so much about things bring you joy. Lots of things bring me joy. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say, there's lots of things that make me happy. But the question is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is the sacrifice worth it? Or is the consumption worth it? It's both sides, right? So as you were talking about the people that go for the financial independence, retire early, is the sacrifice worth it? Or is the consumption worth it? It's exactly on that road, on that path. And so your question was, exactly what was your question that I should have answered?
Why is it important to consider if these things bring you satisfaction? And I think you address that. It's
a balance.
I love that, because I think that's what's missed, is that you can have some of the things. I think, somebody said it well, is you can have some of what you want, but you just can't have everything that you want. I think it's a good way to describe it.
No, what I really like is Scott Galloway. He said, you can have it all. You just can't have it all right now.
Yeah. And that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. No, that's an awesome perspective. So, one of the things we also, want to talk about is risks. So how can people protect themselves with the right health and wealth risks? Recognize those health and wealth risks.
Okay, so for a normal person, I worked at an insurance company for a long time, and we had those people who had snakes at home and who did crazy skydiving without a parachute and crazy things. We had all those things, and those are risks that are kind of out of the limits for a normal person. But so the risks, the health and wealth risks that you take on have to have in a long-term perspective. It has to be there. You have to say, is the balance, is it worth it? So risky, let me think. For example, not saving for your retirement, not saving for whatever it is that you want in the future. There you go, a risk of disappointment, of not being able to have what you want in the future, and a risk of actually not being able to have anything by having not thought about the future. With regard to your health, consuming everything that comes into your mind, and without exercise, that may be really fun right now, but is it worth it in the long term to be overweight and unhealthy and high blood pressure and all the things that come with not having led a healthy lifestyle? So that's from that again, it's always a matter of balancing. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to me right now? And will it be worth it to me tomorrow? And will it be worth it to me in 20 years?
I love that. Is it worth it in the short term as well as the long term? Because like, we talked about with cigarette smoking, is that may not present itself for 20 or 30 years, the health issues. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this probably wasn't worth it. So
Right.
that's an awesome answer. So, as we talked about here, and I think you started to answer this, is why does risk protection go beyond insurance? Why do we need to think about it, as just an insurance policy? What else is risk protection?
Well, for me, first and foremost, is protection is my own personal emergency or rainy day fund. That's my first layer of protection, because there's no insurance company that's going to cover my risk of getting pregnant and wanting to have a baby. Like, there's no insurance company that's going to say, like, no worries, we got you covered for that. It's going to change your life. And when you lose your job, you get some unemployment insurance, but it's not enough to live the way you've lived before. Most accidents, cars or in your house or something, you do have insurance for that, but for the immediate protection of things that happen in your life, something happens to your child, they went on a trip and they have to come home immediately and you have to fly them back to wherever you are. Those are things that you're going to have to cover yourself. And so you need an emergency fund in order to cover your immediate risks, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even if you have insurance, you might have $1,000 deductible or a $2,500 deductible. So
Right.
even with insurance, you still need some liquidity, for that. So I love that. And, to me, financial independence or retirement, what you were talking about earlier, that's risk protection, is having money for the rest of your life is, that's a plan that you're building up to have enough money. You're protecting against that risk.
Even without retiring early.
Yeah, and you can transfer that risk to the insurance company by buying an annuity, of running out of money. Of course, you may not get money from the annuity, and there's other issues, but that's it. So, let's skip. There were a couple questions there that I think we can skip because you've addressed them really well. But one of them, that I definitely like to jump into is what do you consider financial independence? What is financial independence to you?
Financial independence is living without financial stress. That means knowing that I'm able to pay all my bills today and in the future. So financial independence is a worthy goal. It's a kind of hard to calculate when you're 20 what is financial independence is. Because when you're 20, it's all about liquidity and it's about surviving and it's about paying your bills now. And when you get to be in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, that's when you have to start thinking about, okay, and what happens if I don't have an income in the future? And that's when financial independence is important to build that nest egg. And some people can do it really, really well, and some people don't do it well. And I would say, and I'm sorry, but I'm turning back into this, that it's the education of building that nest egg, of building that money that I need for my longevity. That's information that most people don't have. And that's about financial literacy. That's what financial literacy is all about. how can I save? How can I save wisely by investing seriously? And why do some people in our society do it well and others don't? And why aren't there, I'm asking a lot of questions. You should be asking me questions, but why aren't there family offices for people who have no money? Why do you have to have money to go to a family office? Because if you have money, you're already like in that select category of people who have money. But what about the people who are living paycheck to paycheck? How come there's no family offices for them? Because they can't afford to pay in a family office or a financial planner. And that's the people I'm trying to talk to.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing, and why I do this podcast, is to help people, create their own family office, and to have a plan, is because most people can't afford a financial planner. And financial planners have, minimum for, how much assets you need to have, or they charge so much per hour, and there's only so many financial planners anyway. That, I think, to do anything, you have to become educated yourself. Even if you have a financial planner, the more educated you become, the more wisely you can work with your financial planner. So, you and I both feel that financial literacy is at the core of all these things.
Right.
So, as part of this, and you talked about this earlier, and this is, the work you do is, some people are stockholders and some people are services. How can people transition to become owners?
Thank you for the question. Thank you. I like that question a lot because that's where I am. So I was always into, know what you own, buy what you own, and know what you own and own what you know. I was always kind of in that mindset, of I thought everybody should be profiting off of the things that they're consuming. So if you have an iPhone, how cool it is to have an iPhone, how cool it would be to say I own Apple. I was kind of like always in that mindset, but now I've changed. And now I've changed because I realized that it takes a lot of time. People don't have a lot of time, then time is worth a lot. And B, there are very, very good index funds, S&P 500. It's been performing really, really well for the last 20 years. And that would be a place to put every month, have an automatic deposit in an S&P ETF. To have S&P 500 are the 500 biggest companies I think it's 499 because I think Google is in there twice, but it's the biggest 499 companies in the United States. And in Switzerland, we also have the SMI. It's kind of the same in the top 20 companies in Switzerland. And the idea would be to take some money and every month automatically depositing that, buying some fractional share of that ETF. That would be the way to save wisely by investing seriously. Save wisely meaning don't put your money in a bank account. Do not put your money, do not save for the future in a bank account. Your bank account is for the liquidity, the money that you need to live. And also your emergency fund, that has to be there too, because you have to have quick access to that money. But for the money that you're saving for your future, that should be invested in stocks. And the reason is that you're a shareholder then. You are participating in the prosperity of the economy that you are driving as a consumer.
I love that. You're participating in the economy. And that goes back to what you were talking about earlier with economics and the wealth gap. And I think that's something, for most people is accessible. If you're working for a decent sized company in the United States, you're going to have a 401k plan. I know there's different retirement plans, or sometimes known as schemes, which is an interesting word to me. In other countries, I think in England they call it a scheme. So, There are different opportunities no matter where you live to do these things. And as you point out, when you mention the word fractional, that means that you can buy a small amount, that you don't have to spend $100,000 to get into an ETF. As now with these online apps, you can, invest with $50 or $100. So you can get started.
In preparation for this, for meeting you right now, I looked it up, and there's probably much more, but I found 9 banks in the United States that you can actually have your paycheck to put in that account, and you can automatically put in like sub accounts. So you can say this much is for, I don't know, for taxes, and this much is for vacation, and this much is for automatically investing every month. And I don't have to think about that. And we talked about that. And for me, that's the Ozempic of finance, of financial well-being.
Definitely. Well, and so a couple of things about choosing an online financial institution is, one is you want to make sure that they are actually a bank and that you are FDIC protected in the United States, or whatever the equivalent is in your country. The other thing, if you are in the US, I was a judge for the Finder Banking and Innovation Award. So Finder has, which online banks have the best programs. They have really lengthy reviews, so you can read the pros and cons on each institution. So I'd recommend, if you're in the US, to check out Finder's Banking and Innovation Award, see which ones that we felt were the best online banks and which offered the most consumer-friendly services. So, sorry, jumping in with that.
No, that's good. That's good. I just like the idea of automatically funneling your money into those places where you know that you're going to need them, whether it's vacation fund, or food or rent or car or whatever it is, that you can automatically save your money in different sub accounts. And one of those sub accounts automatically every month invests in the stock market, because nobody can time the market, and you're not a financial advisor, and neither am I, and I'm not going to I'm not a trader. And so just by doing monthly installments in the stock market, over time, you'll be fine.
Definitely. And, as you point out, is some of those banks, do have the separate sub accounts which go towards your separate goals. So you want to start out with your goals, as you point out, is like, are you saving for a car? Are you saving for a house down payment? Are you saving for financial independence? And, then start your sub accounts, choose your sub accounts based on those goals. And those institutions do have some already set up that are goal oriented, and they'll help you choose the right financial products and services to meet that goal. Because, as you point out, is you want something different for each goal, or a different mix. And towards the market, I would urge people to go out. It might not be the easy. Well, here's the free thing that you can read: is you go to the Berkshire Hathaway website and you read the annual letter from Warren Buffett. It's free. It's a very easy read, and it tells you about, how Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, known as an investment guru, thinks about investing in the market, and he has other resources available to people. So, there are incredible free resources. Again, the Warren Buffett annual letter to me is, a real template to continue to learn about the markets. So I don't know, do you read the Berkshire Hathaway annual letter?
Yes, but there's a thing here, is that it's not everybody's interest, right? And Warren Buffett said that he would tell his wife when he dies, his wife should just put it in the S&P 500, because he would never bet against the United States. He would always bet for the United States. And that's what I would say to anybody, because really the thing is that most people aren't interested in this. And you have to meet people where they are, and you have to make it easy for them. people would rather take an Ozempic, a shot of Ozempic, than to eat less and exercise more. So we have to meet people where they are, and this is an easy way to do it, and you really don't have to spend much time. And then maybe it's only 50. All right, it's $50 a month for 48 years. I looked this up because I thought I was going to tell you this. It's $50 a month for 40 years. You have $260,000 in the S&P if you invested in this S&P 500 based on the past. What was it, 1920s for the last, whatever, for the last. But if that you did that for 40 years, you'd have $50 a month. You'd have $24,000 in your savings account, interest, inflation, kind of canceling each other out. And if you had invested in the S&P 500, you'd have about 260,000, $250,000. So can everyone invest $50 a month? I don't know, but if you could, I would.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and to what Warren Buffett's advice is for his wife is something that he's also very clear about every year in his letter, to not do what he does. Although so many people in the US do exactly what he does. And that's the first thing he says in his letter is don't do what I do, because, he's got access to more resources. He gets more favorable terms. When he invests, it's 50 million, 100 million, $1 billion, it's, he's investing in a very different way than we are, but it's principles.
But he's looking at the resumes of the managers who run the company. Who has time for that? I mean, it's kind of interesting, but who has time to look what kind of resumes the managers have and what their cash flow interest, discounted cash flow model they're using? It's hard. It's hard. Because he is who he is because he does what he does. And most people are just working. And most people are working for a living wage.
Yeah, and that's just it. That gets back to index funds. And again, neither Tess or I are investment advisors. This does not constitute investment advice. So please do your own research. But, this is just our personal opinions. But yeah, if this is the way I explained it to my 19-year-old son is, he's a professional. He's got a huge staff that does this research. He does this all day, and he's been doing it for 50, 60, 70 years, I guess probably 70 plus years now. He's been doing this. So, it's like trying to play basketball against a professional. You're going to have a really hard time, scoring a point if you're playing an NBA professional in basketball, just because that's what they do and they're the best at what they do. So you can't compare yourselves to them because you don't have the resources or the training or the experience or, whatever. So to start to wrap up, what is a good way for someone to balance their short-term choices with their long-term goals? We've talked about that, but how do they actually balance it? Do you have any tips there?
I mean, the thing that I would do is I would put money for the long term, whatever it is. It's $5, it's $1. I would take that away from my paycheck before I even see it, like taxes in the United States. You put that money as if you never had it, and so it doesn't hurt you because you get used to it. If you get a raise, you get used to it. And if you have a little bit less, you get used to it and you don't realize it. It doesn't hurt. So that's what I would do. So it's balancing the short term to the long term. If I take something away from myself, I get used to what I don't have and I have something for the future. So that's how I would think of balancing.
Well, I think that's great advice. And I've heard that from other guests on the show is, to put that money aside for your goals before you do other things, rather than doing all your other things and then saving with whatever you have left over. That it's a change of mindset in your workflow with your money. I think is key.
I mean, Warren Buffett has a word for that. He says it, pay your future self first.
I love that. Pay your future self first. That's about the best thing you can do. It's hard to top that advice. So, to wrap up, Tess, is what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about money?
It'd probably be to pay your future self first. I mean, that's it. I got that. I stole that from him, but I use it all the time because it hurts the least.
I love that. And I think that's something that we need to think about with both our health and wealth is, what can we do that's not going to be overwhelming? It's like, I like having dessert every once in a while, so, some diets, I went on this diet and it was like you could only eat these prepared meals. And it was so hard to keep up with because, there are some things that bring you joy. And, once you deny yourself everything, you tend to start to bounce back in my experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why. So as I said before, this paying yourself first, putting that money aside before you even saw it practically. You get your paycheck, it goes to your bank, and in your bank account, you just see that there's so much money. You don't really even know what you were paid because it was already taken away right from the beginning. And that to me is kind of like the Ozempic shot. Like you're kind of cheating yourself. You're telling yourself with the Ozempic, you're telling yourself that you're not hungry, right? You are hungry, but you're just telling yourself you're not hungry. And with this paying yourself first and putting that money aside before you even get it, it's like you're kind of cheating yourself, thinking yourself, all right, this is how much money I have. This is really how much money, net money I have to spend. And it just is it's a quick way of, I don't want to say cheating yourself, but it's a quick way of, how can I say that? Because cheating sounds bad, but it's a quick way of limiting yourself without really feeling the limits.
Well, it's changing your habits. And that's what's really key to any thing that you want to achieve in life. If you want to look, you have to change your habits in order to get a positive change. So, that this has been an awesome conversation, Tess. So where can people learn more about you and Equitika and the work that you're doing?
Okay, before I go there, can I just say one thing about the S&P 500A?
Oh, sure.
S&P 500 ETF A, I'm not a financial advisor. I have no idea. And if anybody's listening to this in Switzerland, there's a currency risk. So it's not risk-free. There's always a risk to anything you do. And I'm not a financial advisor. Please talk to somebody who knows more than me. That's the first thing. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm quite a little following there. And you can also Equitika, Equitika, and that's all about equity and inclusivity and education and collaboration. And we're trying to build a community. It's about communities where people can help each other if they have any questions. But you can also see with whom you're communicating so that it's all about trust and transparency and authenticity, which equals integrity. So that you can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn most easily, but Equitika is up and coming.
And is Equitika for people around the world, or is it for
Yes.
people in Swiss? Okay.
No, around the world, because we really want to make this movement where everyone is profiting, participating in the prosperity of economies worldwide.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to Tess's LinkedIn profile and to the Equitika website in the show notes. So you can also go there so you don't have to go back and replay it 3 times to go, what is that spelled again? So that is awesome. So Tess, thank you so much for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Tony, it was such a pleasure. I'm so happy that you invited me to be on your platform. Thank you so much. The more we spread the word, the more equality and equity there will be in society, right? That's the goal.
Definitely. Yeah. And, that this hopefully is something that people will learn from and give them some good ideas on what to do next. So I appreciate your time and your insights. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and tell a friend. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.